Hello, and welcome to the Demiplane of Gaming. I am your host, Stephen D. Russell, and we are here with my co-host, Owen K.C. Stevens.
Hi, folks.
And, we're just referring to this as the return because we've been gone for quite some time as Owen started out his new job. He has been returned to the land of the rain and gray and the western coast and works now for uh, the world's most popular role-playing game, which is the Pathfinder. He works for Paizo now, so while still working for Rogue Genius Games as he runs that, and still being the line developer for uh, Green Ronin's Pathfinder project. So he's not busy at all.
No, of course not. I've got lots of free time.
So Owen, tell us what it's like to pick up your entire life and put it into a very, very small place and start working on a project for another company as soon as you hit the ground.
Um, it's a little daunting. I have made this move once before, but it turns out there's a huge difference between picking everything up and moving across country when you're 30 and doing it when you're in your mid 40s. The late night packing, the carrying of 100-pound boxes, even just the decision to get rid of a house, which last time I decided to sell a house I'd been in I think 3 years. This time it's a house that we've been in 8 years, something like that, longer than I've lived in any place since I got married. And it's sort of a post-collapse house sale, so the house is on the market, has been I think for 3 months now, and we haven't even gotten a serious offer on it yet. So we may be with it for a while. Pardon me. And that informs everything, right? I'm paying for two households. So Seattle's expensive. I won't lie to anyone. It's an expensive place to live, and as a result, we're in a tiny little apartment, which is how we're managing to afford two places at once. Eventually, the house in Oklahoma will sell, and then we'll get a place that is closer to Redmond, which is where the Paizo office is, or bigger, or maybe a little of each, although it's hard to get both big and close to the Paizo office in even a halfway decent price range. So we'll see how that goes. That said, public transit is good in Seattle. The highway system is good in Seattle. It's only a half an hour to work unless there's traffic, and there is frequently traffic. So it ranges from 30 to 75 minutes. Um, Luckily, the Paizo offices are flexible on when you work. There are core hours you have to be there. I just shoot for showing up before those core hours, and sometimes I show up early, and sometimes I don't. The Pathfinder modules line, which is what I'm developing, is a very exciting line. It includes all of the RPG Superstar adventures, all come out as Pathfinder modules. So, for instance, we are working on Victoria Jaxo's adventure, which was the pitch she made when she won Superstar, Daughters of Fury. I'm really excited to see what she's doing with that. I've been looking over Tears at Bitter Manor, which was entirely before my reign, but I actually know Steve Helt, the author, so I'm interested in examining it and looking what it was done with it. The Emerald Spire Super Dungeon just came out, and I did not have anything to do with creating that, but since I am the developer for the Pathfinder modules line, I am doing blog posts for it, so I'm becoming more involved and getting to know what all was done with it. And it's a really exciting project. I'm really impressed with it, and sort of, I wouldn't say sad, it's bittersweet. I wish I'd been more involved with creating it, but obviously a stupid amount of work went into it, and I'm not necessarily saying I wish I had a whole bunch more work to do.
Yes, but now you have access to the modules line, so you can do some support for it down the line if you decide to.
Yeah. Actually, one of the interesting things about the Emerald Spire is that it's got more support than any other module, right? It's got its own flip map pack with 8 double-sided maps, so all 16 levels of the dungeon are available as flip maps. For the people that back the Kickstarter, there are pre-painted plastic miniatures and a couple lead miniatures. For everybody, there's a set of campaign cards that have base cards and quest cards and item cards for things you're going to find in it. So it's the most supported and largest Pathfinder module ever. So it's really exciting in that regard. Of course, when I was hired for this job, they said we haven't ever had a dedicated line developer, and the Pathfinder modules frequently slide a little on the schedule. So I sort of expected I was going to show up and they'd say, "Hey, welcome to Paizo. You're behind." And Lisa Stevens even made that joke on Facebook, right? She said, "Hey, tell them that he's already behind work on day one, and stop getting distracted by free hot dogs and French chocolate, and get to work." So. Uh,
So
there was a fair amount of front loading of fun on my first week, and we're in con season. I did Comic Palooza last month, which was an awesome convention, and I was glad to go, but it did eat into my time a fair amount. I'm doing SoonerCon back in Oklahoma City this month, the end of this month, which is, when I was originally asked if I wanted to be a guest, it was going to be a 30-minute drive. Now it's a 5-hour airplane flight. But it's an opportunity to see my friends and family back in Oklahoma again, so I'm still going to do it. Then the next weekend is PaizoCon here in Seattle, which will be my first PaizoCon, and I'll be running the show, and I'll be sitting on a panel, and I'm in fact running Emerald Spire for people that happen to win that spot in the lottery. And then next month is Gen Con, which I'm also going to for Paizo, and also hoping to do some stuff for Frieder and Ian if I've got spare time. So I foresee getting a day off sometime in late September or early October. And until then, it's sort of nonstop work on Paizo all day, every day during the weekdays. Either work on Paizo projects or Green Renine projects every night, and then determine what's most on fire during the weekend and get that done.
yeah. I
On
don't
the other
know.
hand, right,
Speaking
I'm,
of
I'm
speaking of PaizoCon, and we'll come back to this later, but
yeah,
I wanted to mention it here. I found it really frustrating this year that, and I've talked to many people who had a similar issue, was there were a couple people who wanted to come as third-party publishers to be able to have booths at PaizoCon, and even Chris Pramis wasn't able to. There was no room for us because, and that surprised me because there were less. Lewis Porter went last year, but yet he didn't go this year. So I was assuming that there would be room, because there's less people going. But yet, then we thought about it, and we're all sitting around, and I was like, yeah, that whole section just got taken up by the Pathfinder card game.
yeah, and so the card game takes up a fair amount of room. There's a lot of miniature stuff going on. The company is growing, right? And one of the things that we try to do at PaizoCon is to give people an opportunity to talk to developers and. Hey, what's this, Steve?
It's grown a little bit, just a little bit.
Well, that depends on how much you want to count Goblin Works, right? Which is a separate company, but is also doing Pathfinder related things. But I'm new there. There are some other new hires that are there. There's more projects going on. There's the entire adventure card game, which is a whole new set. The comics are going on, the figures. So that stuff takes up room. But also, right, it's never been booths in the traditional sense, right? There's been a room where you could buy stuff, and if you were a publisher and you got a table there, your stuff was actually, you could hawk it, but it got bought through the Paizo store that was set up there. So it's an odd little convention, as I understand it. I haven't actually been to one yet, so I'm basing all of this off of what I've seen and what I've talked about.
Yeah,
It's
when I
really
talked
very
to
much a Paizo expanded way traditional game to be, and so is going to be having to look all to keep this on 4th of July weekend, which has frequently happened because that keeps your numbers of who can attend down to a certain extent. We try to move it. When are we going to move it to? Because it's convention season, everything is
yeah,
taken. The prep for this takes a fair amount of time, and if we made it bigger, that would take even more time from the company. And at the same time, we're having to get ready for Gen Con already. We've got people that are out to Origins right now. I and Adam Daigle were both out at Comic Palooza. So growing it to the point where there would actually be something like a dealer's room that would have booths is a neat idea, and it's entirely not my department, right? So I'm not saying
yeah.
it will happen or it won't happen, but I can already see that it would take a lot of work, and that work has to come from someplace.
Yeah, well, originally PaizoCon was just a group of fans who decided they wanted to do
Right.
something, and then, it's grown out of that, and the con really has outgrown its location, from what I understand, because it has a limitation on the number of people who can even attend, which is unusual for a convention to have a limitation like that. When I talked to them about the problem, because I was like, like I said, I wasn't the only person who, uh, if it was just me, it'd be one thing. But when it's multiple publishers, you're like, yeah, we want to come out, and we want to come. If we're going to come to PaizoCon, we're publishers. We want to bring our stuff with us, and that was
Sure.
just an odd situation where I was like, really, there's not any space,
Well, and currently,
Yeah.
right, there really isn't. I mean,
Yeah.
what will happen next year and the year after, I can't say. But right now, the primary goal of PaizoCon is to let the fans play and interact with the Paizo employees, and so that's the first priority. And no one wants to sacrifice time, room, or resources from that uh, to bring in other companies, even beloved third-party companies, right? I mean, years ago, Super Genius Games had a table, but it was literally a small little table, and you could hold stuff up and say, if you want to buy this, you can take it right over there to the Paizo cash register and buy it. But it wasn't being sold through Super Genius.
Yeah,
So
I wouldn't. I
there's
didn't. I wouldn't have had any problem with them taking if there's not a booth charge price for us, I have no problem with doing a consignment thing where they take their percentage that even if it's going
well, but
through
there still does have to be a price, right? Because you're still
yeah,
taking up space, and
yeah,
they need a bigger room if they're doing that.
yeah.
So
Well, I just
anyway,
think they need a bigger facility. But anyway, moving on from PaizoCon that I enjoy and would like to come to someday, we're talking about Owen's new job.
well, and we're talking about a lot of things, right? It's a
Yeah.
Demiplane of gaming. There's upsides and downsides to any of this, and
How has the transition been for you from being a working on your own schedule to now working on somebody else's schedule?
so that noise that you hear is my wife laughing in the background, right? So in for more than a decade, LJ has worked in one office or another, and I have worked from home. And if I have a bout of insomnia or I'm not in the mood to work at 8 o'clock in the morning or whatever, as long as my work got done, it was fine. But LJ was on a set, show up at this hour, leave at that hour schedule. Great. So now, because LJ's employer in Oklahoma City didn't want to lose her, and they said, no, go ahead and telecommute, set your own hours, work for your apartment, that'll all be fine. LJ can work whenever the heck she wants to. I have set office hours where I have to show up and I need to be there during these core hours. Now, those are flexible, right? I can show up early so I can leave early. I can show up late in the morning and work into the early evening. But I do have to be there Monday through Friday, and there's a good reason for that, right? I mean, being a developer is about more than just taking this, in my case, adventure and modifying it so that it meets all of our needs. It's also about if an editor isn't sure how a rules work, the editor can walk over and say, hey guys, is there a spell that will do this thing? And they may be asking because there's a they're editing. They also may be asking because they're looking at one of the novels, or they may be asking because they're looking at some of the cards or some of the comic back matter. Might be a question. We have the same advantage, right? If a developer's like, okay, so is it a Rocky Mountains or are Rocky Mountains? It's a single thing, but it's plural. There's a style guide, and it covers a whole lot of that. But if you're thinking to yourself, just what exactly is the plural of necrophidius? Um, I don't have to shoot an email, right? I can step up and walk over and say, hey guys, what's our official plural for necrophidius? And all the editors can get in on that, and when the answer comes along, all the developers can hear it. And part of what we do is we have meetings where we get together and we say, what are issues with adventure design that we are think might need to be answered? Where do the developers want to talk to the design team? Where do the editors have a list of things that we are consistently getting wrong that they would like to see us work on? And the ability to be in the same environment there means that not only do those all happen faster, but you can get in on something just because you overhear it in the background.
Yeah, but the real point is that I get to sleep in while you're working.
And LJ says, but the real point is she gets to sleep in while I'm working. So there's absolutely an adjustment. There's no doubt about it, right? My work schedule was very much used to be like, if I happen to put in 18 hours on Monday, I might take Tuesday off and sit and read a book. And then I have to go back to a crunch on Wednesday. And as long as I hit my deadlines, it wasn't a big deal. I have done the office environment thing before, right? I worked for Wizards of the Coast back in 2000, 2001. But I am sorely out of practice, and people have seen me show up bleary-eyed, in need of caffeine, going, yeah, I didn't have a good night, and I had to show up here.
Yeah.
I think the upside significantly outweighs the downside. Being able to turn to the other developers and say, so is a golem immune to illusions? Because they might allow SR, or does the golem always fall for an illusion until the illusion interacts for it, or how's this going to work? And I can get their opinions immediately.
Yeah.
That ability to lean to the person next to you, the example I always give, and say, I've got an idea. Is this brilliant or is this stupid? And get really quick feedback on that. And frequently the answer is, well, it's a little of each, and maybe we can polish it to be an improvement.
Yeah.
So
you have a high level of professional talent as your sounding board now,
yeah.
and it be immediate interaction.
Well, we used to say that one of the reasons that we did the Demiplanes was that it's hard to have that kind of professional role-playing game designer interaction.
Yeah.
And there's literally a water cooler at Paizo, right? And that's an opportunity to talk about things that are really relevant to us at a professional level that's hard to do outside of a game company environment.
Yeah. So, talking about the Pathfinder module, because you are the line developer, and Demiplane can take advantage of that for the next 5 minutes that I have of Owen's time. What are you excited about? I know you have your current release with the super dungeon, and you have an adventure from Steve Helt. You said that you're. What are you excited about before the line?
So I'm trying not to get too excited about things too far out. For one thing, there are a lot of things that aren't announced and I can't talk about yet. The things that are already announced, there's Peril and Plunder, which, for people that don't know, the Pathfinder modules line is normally, or at least used to be, a 32-page module line. That recently expanded to a 64-page module line, which means that the modules, we've got more room to play with. That opens up opportunities which you have not had before. Now, the Emerald Spire is a special case. It's 160 pages, hardback, and I never say never, but it strikes me as unlikely another module like that is going to be coming down the pipe anytime soon. But I was just working on Plunder and Peril, which we have an opportunity as a result of the size, rather than have a single adventure by a single author, we have a series of short adventures by different authors, all of which tie into a theme, all of which either can be standalone, or they can be played in a row, or you can use them as part of Skull and Shackles if you're so inclined, and that tie into the card game. So that's an opportunity to do a lot of different things with the module that we haven't been able to do before, and I'm really excited to see how that goes over, and that's the sort of thing I hope to look at in the future, right? How can we use the Pathfinder modules line either to specifically augment other things that are going on, or possibly sometimes to do counter-programming, right? If currently the Mummy's Mask is going on, and that's a very Osirian-based adventure path. So being able to have more sort of knights and dragons type stuff away from the more Egyptian theme and the adventure path means that if you don't happen to like that adventure path, if it is following some theme or some area that you're not a fan of, we can do something else. One of the nice things about Golarion as a whole is that there's a bunch of different flavors of area and a lot of different opportunities. There are things I'd like to do that I don't know are going to happen yet. I'm a huge fan of Absalom. Absalom has not been featured in a lot of adventures recently. I'd like to see us getting back to doing that more, but that's in the haven't even pitched it to the boss yet category. So
Gotcha.
These are things that may happen. My number one priority is to get the things that are already decided that we're already working on done to a high quality, and for me to learn from that process. Because while I have been a developer before, I've never been a developer for Paizo before, and there are some very specific ways that they do things that allow them to get the quality level they get. And there's some institutional knowledge that they all know that they don't even necessarily know that other people don't know. And so not just learning that institutional knowledge, but trying to point out what it is we don't know. There's now a process going on where a lot of that stuff's getting written down. So if another developer gets brought in later down the line, they might have more of a research to go to. Although it's always going to, you're never going to have absolutely everything everyone does written down in a document, right? So you're going to have to be able to hit the ground running and pick it up as you go.
Good. Well, it sounds like you're really enjoying the work, and that it's at least a challenging reward as far as being a game designer is concerned. And of course, you're in the top field there for the industry as far as tabletop role playing goes. How has been the feel as far as the announcements for 5th edition? Your personal response. I'm not asking for an official Paizo response. I want this to be clear to folks.
Right. Well,
I'm
I think
asking
the official response is going to be. I think my response is going to be really similar to what the official Paizo response would be, which is that I'm really interested to see what they do with it. I was involved in the playtest process for quite a while, and it was obvious that they were using that to go through different ideas and check them out. So I suspect the final product is going to end up being different in noteworthy ways from any of the playtests. I am most interested to see that Steve Winter, Wolfgang Bauer, through Open Design, have done the first big adventure for it.
Yeah,
I think it's really interesting.
That was a big strike for me when I learned that they were doing that. I had learned well before I think it happened that they were working on it. That it was. I think the question was was this going to be an isolated thing? Were they going to reach out to different companies, or was this simply a case is that they wanted Wolfgang and Steve Winter to work on it? So that it'll be interesting to see how that develops over time.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how that pans out and what the long-term plans are. I know, and it's 13-year-old knowledge, but I know from back when I worked at Wizards of the Coast in 2000 that you form a plan, you see how that works going forward, and then if necessary, you change it. So I'm sure that they are also interested to see how this works, both as is it popular and is the process working for what they want to produce. There's some really sharp people at Wizards of the Coast, so I expect them to look at any of these possibilities and match it to both the quality and the process they want to go. But overall, I'm a fan of D&D, and I know I will pick up the core books, and I'll take a look at it, and I'll decide whether or not this version of D&D matches what I want to play with or not, and whether anyone's running a game I can get in or not. I think D&D being strong is good for the industry as a whole, so I hope it's a hit. I also think that Pathfinder has already built its own base. It's interesting, there was just recently a video by the group Mammoth that had some role-playing going on, and the role-playing tools that they had were the beginner box and some of the pawns. So Pathfinder is becoming more synonymous with role-playing in general to people in a much broader field than just RPG fans. And I, in general, think that competition and options are good. So I'm really excited to see what the next year or two brings. As Wizards goes back to having D&D product available, we see how they handle.
Well, it seems that I lost Owen. Hopefully we'll get him back here in just a moment. I don't know what happened there. One of the things that I'll talk a little bit about, because if Owen, of course, had to leave, Owen had to leave. One of the things I will talk a little bit about, I was actually not interested in fifth edition. I had no plans for it. I really was not considering doing anything for it until it was announced that Wolfgang, that Kobold Press was doing the adventure for it. So that's something that I'm looking forward to reading and seeing how it develops, and because I'm a huge fan of Wolfgang's, and his involvement is what got me interested in wanting to do 5th edition. So I actually reached out to a couple people to see about maybe doing some adventures for it after Mike Merrill's announcement about what they were planning to do for third-party content, and I was a little disappointed in that because their statement was that they were going to wait till next year, and that's fine. I understand not releasing the license because I think it's a good statement that we want to learn more about the game and get a system mastery of it so that you can do good development for it. But they didn't answer the real question. Is it going to be OGL? Is it going to be GSL? Is it going to be these private arrangements like they did with Cobalt Press? That was disappointing to me. I would have been very interested to see what he had to say. So I guess we'll have to wait and see about that. I don't want to go more into my plans other than to say, I'd like to do some 5th edition support just to see what the market reaction is. And in my support for it would be to write adventures. Mechanics-wise, for my personal thing, I'm writing a lot of setting material right now, and I'm doing a lot of my game design has to do with developing stuff for the Questhaven setting right now and the Kaiden setting and doing stuff for our diceless games. So, but I have a big thing for adventures, as people can see. We recently threw a lot of support behind Adventure Quarterly. So, hold on just a second, folks. I'm going to try to see if I can get Owen back online. Here he comes. Yay. So, nice to have you back, Owen.
Hey, folks.
Yep, sorry about that, Owen. I just went on about, after you accidentally got dropped off, I talked a little bit about the fact that one of the things that really interested me and got me, because I had pretty much written 5th edition off, I wasn't interested in it. They hadn't done a lot to really attract me to it. Their focus on Forgotten Realms had attracted me a little, but bringing Wolfgang on the way they had really got me interested in what they were doing. And I talked a little bit about, that was at the first point, even as a publisher, much less as a player, that I got interested in it. And then I got disappointed again when Mike Merrills came on to talk about whether it was going to be, what the licensing for third-party publishers was going to be, and he didn't really answer the question. And I was, to me, you either come out and don't say anything, or, saying wait and see is fine, but I was still like, you said wait and see, but then you didn't say what we were waiting to see.
It would not surprise me to learn that a final decision on what form any of that is going to take hasn't occurred yet, right? I know that any time a project this big is moving towards its deadline, you're always triaging your decisions because, the distributors were probably told 6 months ago when this was coming down the pipe, and the book buyers, and you've got to have your print run in months and months and months in advance, which means if something then delays you, there's no way to catch up on that other than to triage what decisions you're making.
Yeah, but I would have thought, from a lawyer's point of view, I would have thought the format of third-party licensing would have been decided already, whether it was going to be something like the GSL, whether it was going to be just going to be OGL, whether it was just going to be closed. You can submit your application. We'll decide, if we're going to license it to you. That kind of stuff I would have thought had already been decided from a level above the designer.
Well, but even at that level, right? Currently, they're involved in a lawsuit about whether or not Sweet Pea Entertainment gets to keep making D&D movies. And it would not at all surprise me if the legal team says we are not tackling new licensing until we have settled this issue of what's going on with this license from back before Wizards of the Coast bought it. Right? You've got an open rights question about D&D intellectual property right now. And whether or not third-party publishers get to publish something is significantly less important than whether or not Wizards of the Coast is who makes the next movie.
Yep.
So, again, there are even a big company like WotC, even as part of Hasbro, there's a limited amount of resource to go around. So, and I'm curious too, right? If there isn't a possibility for third-party publishers to have a license for a more broad possibility, that's something that, switching hats from my Paizo hat to my Rogue Genius hat, that's something I would be very interested in knowing. But I'm not in the least bit surprised that that's not there at the top or even midway down their priority list, because they're D&D, and when they're ready to tell us, they'll tell us, and we will all read whatever they announce whenever that time comes. the people who want to do other stuff, the people who want to do 13th Age, who want to do Pathfinder, who want to do Dungeon World, are already doing it, right? So they're
Yeah.
not even really losing market share by waiting. They're not in a race at this point. They're going to come out with something new, and we'll all be interested in seeing what the options are as soon as they tell us. It'd be different if they were trying to beat someone to market, but I don't think they are at this point.
Yeah, because they've already lost the market. You know, they've
Well,
they've let that, and they realize that, and they're revising their game system. You know, they've pretty much flushed Fourth E, and they've moved on to Fifth Edition. They spent a year doing the open play test, which was basically follow the leader at that point for what was according to what the common wisdom is that Pathfinder has become the market leader, and that's easier to do when there isn't uh, an active. They've had a year of nothing coming from, and probably I should say 2 years, because there was the announcement that they were going to do fifth edition, and then you had the year of the playtest, and now you have the.
Swapping editions is always difficult, right? When they announced fourth editions, they tried to do some product all the way through, and it was just really hard to convince people, yes, this is not yet fourth edition stuff. Yes, this is not going to be necessarily beneficial to what we're doing, but go ahead and buy it anyway. So,
Yeah, it's always hard to do that. There was a great, I think, what was it, Sean K. Reynolds really got hit with, what was it, Ghost Walk?
Yeah.
Was the campaign setting that he had done and did it, put a lot of his heart and soul in it, from what I understand, and it got hit with the middle of the announcement that it was, they were moving on to fourth edition.
Yeah, whatever you do, that time is going to be tricky. And during this time, right, one of the things they have done is they've started to sell PDFs again of all of their editions, right? So you can buy first, and they did the collector's editions of first and second and third, and I think even like chainmail. So
yeah, and they even did other books that were harder to get, like the Spell Compendium and the Magic Item Compendium.
Yeah. So I think anytime you're going to switch editions, you're in a tricky spot, especially if you decide you're going to take the risk for a public playtest, and that worked really well for Paizo, and I think it probably gave some very useful feedback to Wizards of the Coast. You can't take one of the conventional wisdom solutions, which is to have everything ready to go before you warn anyone it's coming. So yeah, there was no new D&D product for a while. I don't want to speculate on sales, and one of the reasons I don't want to speculate on sales is that a lot of Paizo sales are through their store, and that's not reported to anyone, and a lot of the money that Wizards of the Coast makes is their subscriptions, and those aren't reported to anyone.
Yeah,
so a big chunk of what both companies are making is stuff that isn't reported to anybody.
Yeah.
Not even by someone calls up the game store and says, hey, what are you selling the most of? So either Wizards of the Coast will be happy with the numbers they get, or they won't. Those are going to be based on whatever numbers they think are appropriate. They've done a lot of exciting stuff with the D&D intellectual property, like Lords of Waterdeep, that aren't even necessarily a role-playing game.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say that we will keep seeing D&D branded things for a long time to come. That might or might not include a role-playing game, and I think that'll depend in large part on how 5th edition is received.
Okay. So I know Owen has to go here, folks. Otherwise, I'd keep him on for the full hour. So I don't want to lose him from that.
I got a little time yet.
Okay, you got a little time yet? Okay. Well, you'll get to announce when we've come to the Pimp Your Product section of the Demiplane of Gaming. I'll let you decide when you want to come to that. So, God, what have we done? So we've talked a lot about Paizo's. How has been your work process for Green Ronin and Rogue Genius Games while you've been in this transition?
So Rogue Genius simply had to take a back seat for a while, and the advantage of owning and running the company is I get to decide when it takes a back seat. We just put out, and I'll talk about it more later, we just put out our first product since I came out here, which is Ultimate Option Story Feats. So we are getting back to that now that I'm not having to do things like unpack boxes and try to figure out how to drive the highway system to work. Green Ronin, actually, I managed to have a couple meetings with Chris Pramus. One of the advantages of being out here is I don't have to do stuff by email and by Skype. I can sit down and talk to them. They're doing art previews for Freeport right now, and I believe we have put out a PDF to backers for the PDF book of the text prior to full layout and art and all of that, so they can see where we are. That book's looking really strong. I love the art that's coming out for it. I like a lot of the stuff that the guys at Ferrari Dragon and Christina Stiles did with the adventure and a lot of the background material. I wrote a lot of the rules stuff for it. I think it's going to be a popular, solid book, and I'm looking at ways to build on that with other products. The Advanced Bestiary is also moving along nicely. We're also getting to see the art for that. The Hero Lab files are being worked on as we speak. So, I have a number of hours that I try to do that within a week, and what it boils down to is I try and get an hour, maybe two, in the evenings when I get home if I've got a chance, and then I catch up on the rest on the weekends. So that's the Green Ronin process, and that having kind of figured out what I'm doing at Paizo, I need to get more serious about figuring out a reliable pattern for getting my Green Ronin stuff done in a timely manner. It's been a little catch as catch can, and I put in a bunch of time just before I moved to make sure Advanced Bestiary moved forward. I put time in. The art order for Freeport took forever, and that was something that a bunch of us worked on, Chris Pramus included. For Rogue Genius, Christina Stiles is stepping up as the developer, and that's helpful. Steve Helt and his freelancing group, the Four Horsemen, even though there are only three of them at the moment, are producing a lot of stuff. And so that's an exciting opportunity for me to do less. One of the things with Super Genius was I wrote 85% of everything.
Yeah.
And that's not a viable plan for Rogue Genius at this point. So I have to make more of the transition from writer to publisher. There is stuff I'm still going to write. I was working on Talented Ranger just last night. But more and more, I'm going to be working with other people to have them look at our line, figure out something like move forward, and sort of get lines handed over to groups of freelancers I trust. That's less time-consuming than writing it and developing it and editing it and publishing it myself, but it does still take some time. And that tends to be happen to be awake at 4 o'clock in the morning work. I want to get on a more regular schedule with Rogue Genius. We'll see how well I do with that.
Yeah, I'm sure it's got to be, you just lost all the hours you put in at Paizo from all of those projects. So, but of course, you gained a paycheck. Don't get me wrong, yeah. But as far as production time goes, you lost a lot of time that you were used to having.
I did, but the flip side of that is that Rogue Genius and Green Ronin were never all of my time, right? Because I also had great big freelance projects.
Yeah, that's
where
true.
I write, here's 20,000 words on the advanced class guide races in Galarian.
Yeah.
So I'm not doing that anymore. And that I have almost no outstanding freelance writing projects. For Adventure Week's upcoming Snow White thing, I promised them a while ago I would do one monster, so I will do one monster for that. That's not a huge time sink. I've had a lot of people contact me, of course, because once you're a developer for Paizo, anyone that's writing any Pathfinder material wants to know if you're free to work for them.
Oh, yeah.
And sadly, the answer at the moment is mostly no. I don't have the time for it. I got, I think literally the day before we left Oklahoma, Stephen Randall McFarlane from Paizo said, hey, here's this big design rules book. Would you like a chunk of it? And I'm like, well, yes, I'd love a chunk of it, but it's just not going to happen. I can't take a big freelance project, even from Paizo, just before I move and start working full-time at Paizo. So I probably will do more writing and things beyond my development for Paizo once I'm settled in. But I'm going to wait until I know that I figured out where the time of everything goes before I start taking that kind of commitment, because that's where my Paizo work time is mostly coming from right now.
Yep.
Um, so I mean, it's neat, right? I'm getting to do 3 different things for 3 different companies, all in the same game system, and I appreciate that a lot. That's a great opportunity, and it represents a significant amount of trust from all 3 of those companies. Now, one of those companies is largely me, so I trust myself. Fine, but prior to being hired, one of the things that I talked about with Eric Mona and Wes Schneider and Chris Pramus and Nicole Lindroos was, how am I going to balance Green Ronin and Paizo? And everyone was really accommodating at saying, look, this is what we need, this is what we can offer, and we came to a place where we were all happy with what I was telling each group of people I would be giving them. So I'm really happy that seems to be working out. If it doesn't work out, right, then we'll sit down and we'll figure out what we need to do. We're all adults, and no one is hung up on corporate culture to the point where we're insisting on a cookie cutter set of rules. But right now, stuff's getting done. I'm having a good time. I think some awesome shit's coming out of it. So I'm
Good.
hopeful that the arrangement will continue forward as is.
Okay. I'm glad to hear it. Things have been odd for Wright Publishing with a lot of the transition that has been going on. For those who don't know a lot about our schedule, for the longest time, our biggest, cash cow was Pathfinder. I was always excited about Pathfinder. I was designing stuff for it almost, every other week. There was something with my name on it, and that has kind of completely gone by the wayside. I haven't released anything that's had my name, as the foremost designer since, I think, December, when I did the Secrets of the Divine. Was the last time that I really was the major player in something. I've pretty much gone to being a full-time publisher now. And we've kind of split ourselves across between our Diceless game and Pathfinder, and seeing a tremendous, part of that has to do with, I don't want to get people to get wrong and think that Pathfinder is unhealthy because I'm having more success with the Diceless. You have to understand that I have a group of fans that haven't had anything for 20 years, and they really are hungry for it, while Pathfinder gets a very steady set of very high-quality releases. And
right, I mean, you are the Diceless publisher, right? You're doing
yes.
the core book. You are providing the line. You are pretty much the only source for anyone who wants any part of that.
Yeah, I'm pretty much close to being the. There's another guy who's done a unofficial version of the game, but he doesn't have any support for his core book, and that's it. But as far as an official version, I am the first party publisher, so that's a huge advantage when you're talking about a game line. I've had some really. It's just been one of those interesting transitions for me. It's the first time we've ever had something like this, and it's been a real big success for us. And we've had some really, really talented designers because we had the support of our Kickstarter. I've worked with everybody. We're just about ready to release Matt Forbeck's book here, and I'm trying to gear up to get ready to. I would like to release 3 books. Well, 3 products, not 3 books. 3 products when I get to Gen Con. And we've had to go through a transition. I haven't talked much about it, and I've pretty much kept quiet about it, but I'll say a little bit here, is that we had to end our relationship with our print distribution partner, Chronicle City, because a lack of contact, a lack of communication was really what it came down to about a lot of things. And when that stuff breaks down, you try to move along as quickly as possible. So then there was a scramble to, where are we going to have our stuff when we go to Gen Con, because we're not going to be in their booth. And I was very fortunate in that a number of my friends who, have booths there were very much like, yes, you can bring your product and have it in our booth. And I felt really great about that. So that was a really nice thing. I want to thank everybody who I eventually ended up going with Little Red Goblin Games was the company who I ended up going with. But I wanted to thank everybody who reached out to me and was like, "Yes, I'll be happy to have your product in our booth." And that was a big frustration for me because I've always had my stuff at Gen Con since
Right.
For
Well, that's
3-4 years
that's
now.
exactly the
But
sort of thing I was talking about, right? If
yeah,
something turns out not to be working, you talk around, you put on your big boy pants, and you find a solution. So
yeah, it would have been me, having it in the trunk of my car if it would have come down to it, and begging somebody just to hide it in their booth someplace so that somebody could at least walk up and ask for it. If it's not on display, that's fine, but at least something. So, but we have Matt Forbeck's Nexopolis. We have the Icon deck of cards that we're going to have there, and I'm trying to get ready to have a new Pathfinder hardcover release called The Treasury of Magical Items, which is going to be like our 1001 Spells book. It's going to be a compilation of
right.
all the magical items books that we've done, and it's going to be a pretty big book. So
Let's segue from that into pimp our product, since
okay.
you're already talking about some upcoming cup. So, Steve, pimp your product.
Oh, let's see. Wow, it's been a long time, but I'll just stick with what we just released this week. I'm not going to go too far back, but I will touch a little bit on Pathfinders. The week before, we released our newest Pathfinder release, which is called one of our number 30 series or pound 30 series. Mercenary Companies is what we did this time. Liz Smith, who did our portable rooms for the same series, has come back and written a really great piece, and it's gotten nothing but 5-star reviews so far. It has some really neat artwork, I think, that I have pulled from a number of sources. It has a lot of influences from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's The White Company, and of course Glenn Cook's The Black Company that Owen is so very familiar with. But she really brings this idea of integrate, multiple different companies that have relationships with each other, and it really gives you that feel for that free company era of the Italian countryside when all wars were fought using mercenary companies. And she uses the mass combat system, which was an iffy thing for me. I wasn't sure it was going to sell really well, but she does such a great job with staying on top of the flavor that the mechanics didn't have as huge of an impact as I thought they would. So it came out really well. It has some one of our newest editors, Savannah Broadway, who was a Paizo intern. Did the editing on this, and it came back, it's just really well written, and I've been really impressed with it, and we've had a lot of great feedback about that. So it was great to see that series come back and do so strongly with such a unique book compared to what we've done before. This was not a heavy crunch book. And then, of course, we just released our newest Diceless product. Matt Bannock does a series for us just called, we do little supplements to support the core book, and these are just little gossamer worlds that touch upon stuff. And this one is called the Verse Arcanum, which is just about how Lords of Gossamer Shadow end up being the big bad evil guys on a magical world, because they come there and they set up their little domains and use them to test all their magic and so forth. And you have to remember, when you're being a warden like this and you're coming into a place and just setting up a domain because that's one of the powers that a lord has, you're really stealing somebody's land and taking over and imposing your will on this, and the natives aren't always happy when you do that. So it was a really interesting take, but he touches on he really takes a look at the standard fantasy setting and how the swashbuckling urban fantasy world hopping swashbucklers of Diceless affects a setting like that when they walk in through one of the doors and take over a domain. And it was just really, really interesting take on it. I was really happy with it. There's a lot of great art in there, and it's probably one of my favorite little pieces, just because it takes one of my favorite things, like a standard Pathfinder fantasy setting, and brings it in and shows how dramatic a difference the Diceless game is on a setting like that. So I've had a lot of fun with that. So
Cool.
And I'm really, really pleased with that. I can't say Matt just always surprises me when you give him something. He's just somebody that I'd let Matt write anything, and I'd just read it and edit it and then publish it. And it's very seldom that I have to go back to him and say, no, 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 you can't do that. I can't think of a single time that we've ever had to do that. He's just that talented of a guy, and I'm so happy to have him as a member of Write Publishing. So, Owen, you've just released Story Feats you were talking about?
Yeah, so we just did Ultimate Option Story Feats, which was written by Rich Howard and Mike Wellham. Mike Wellham of RPG Superstar fame. It's an expansion of the Story Feats from Ultimate Campaign, and for people that haven't picked up Ultimate Campaign, by the way, by Paizo, it's an awesome book. But the way Story Feats work is that you pick a feat that represents a goal and part of your background. So, for example, you might have a story feat that somebody killed off your entire family and your whole village, and you don't know who they were, and all you have is an amulet with two snakes facing each other. You want to hunt them down and destroy them. And you get a benefit for having that story feat, a feat benefit like a regular feat. And then when you accomplish that goal, the benefit either changes or improves a little as a story reward for having accomplished this goal. And it allows GMs to work with players to say, okay, what is part of your background that will work well with what I have set up for this campaign, so that we can have these rules help us tell a more interesting story. And that's my main pitch for Story Feats, is let the rules help you tell an epic story. The only drawback from my point of view from Story Feats from Ultimate Campaign is that there just aren't that many of them, right? And I don't know the number off the top of my head, but when you're thinking about every possible background and goal and motivation for a character ever, a 4-page spread just isn't going to cover that. And it means that when you're trying to use them out of the book, you frequently end up sort of having to shoehorn what you had in mind or what the GM had in mind to one of the existing feats. So with Ultimate Options, we added more than 40 more feats, and they hit a huge range of possibilities. And that means that it's much easier to say, here is my character concept. Here is what the GM has in mind for his campaign. Oh, look, here's a feat that tells that story without us having to bend over backwards to make it relevant.
Yeah.
It's already picked up 2 5-star reviews, even though it's only been out for a week. I'm really happy with what Rich and Mike did with it. We're already talking about possibly doing a follow-up book to it. So, and it's the first Rogue Genius product we've managed to put out since I have moved out to Seattle, which was somewhat time-consuming and distracting. So it's nice to see that it's still possible for me to produce these sort of design-elemented things that I get really excited by seeing the possibilities of. Right now, quite possibly literally as we speak, we are doing layout on the next Superpowered Bestiary, which is Jacob Blackman's. He both writes and illustrates basically 3rd edition bestiary entries for Monsters and Masterminds, which is very, very useful, obviously, for a fantasy Mutants and Masterminds game. It's also, in many ways, useful for just standard superheroes, right? There are a lot of, Fing Fang Foom is a dragon that shows up in standard fantasy. There's a fair number of mythological superheroes. If you need a Cyclops for Wonder Woman to fight, or if you need ice giants and fire giants for Thor to fight, or if the Dormammu is sending demons after your Sorcerer Supreme. These are things that come up. And I love Mutants and Masterminds, but the only drawback is that you sort of have to have everything written up in order to be able to do stuff with it. So things go in a direction you don't expect, and suddenly your players decide that they are going to the Forbidden Caverns, which are a lost world of dinosaurs, and you need a T-Rex. You don't want to have to take the time to write up a T-Rex. And so
and there are a huge number of classic superhero stories that have to do with the supernatural in and of themselves. Besides having, somebody decides to play a character like Doctor Strange or Ghost Rider or Blade or someone who is, tied to that type of origin.
Right.
you have a character like Thor who's very tied to mythology. You have a character like Wonder Woman who's very tied to mythology. If you look at Peter David's entire run of Aquaman, we were talking about this today with Jacob Blackman earlier, about what's cool about Aquaman. If you look at his whole run, he took him and turned him very much into an Arthurian style character, and magic and super science and that kind of stuff really comes into play. So
Right.
yeah, I'm really a big fan of the of that bestiary, and I'm glad to see that it's continuing on.
Yeah, the next one should be out this coming week.
And we lose Owen again. So, folks, we have now at least gotten through Pimp Your Product, so I will go ahead and wrap up the Demiplane of Gaming for this week. I'm really happy to have finally gotten back, and hopefully we'll be able to continue with this kind of schedule as Owen and I work out what's the best time for him with his new responsibility at Paizo's. We encourage him to have a great and prosperous time there. I, of course, am your host, Stephen D. Russell. Oh, I forgot one thing I did want to mention to everybody here at the end. Check out Drive-Thru RPG's 10th anniversary sale. I actually have a product, the Book of Monster Templates. For $10, you get 10 great RPGs, so each one for $1. And one of those is mine. So you can check that out just on the main page at Drive-Thru RPG. They've got a little big banner ad there. Go ahead and check that out. Again, I'm your host, Stephen D. Russell, for the Demiplane of Gaming, and you have a very good evening, folks. Thank you. Bye.